So I welcome you all to the live analysis of this recently concluded CMAT 2025. So right now, most of you are eager to look at how did you do in your exam, right? Of course, eagerness at one side, but I would like to just start off the session by saying that whatever was to be done was done. It's closed. So there is no need to think a lot about what could have gone right or wrong. So anyways, we at Time are bringing you the CMAT analysis. So let's go through the paper, and along the way, we'll look at some of the questions also. And while looking at the questions, we'll also be discussing about what could have been a good number of attempts in various sections. But before we do any of that, I would like to quickly take you all through basics of the CMAT, right? Basics of CMAT meaning the basics of the CMAT test as such. So let's get started with that. And if there are any queries in between, please keep posting them, right? If there is any particular question that you want me to take up, all right, a point that you want me to discuss, we can also do that along the way. So let's get started. So CMAT is not a new paper, as we are aware, right? This is been in existence for quite some time now, right? And this is taken by the scores are accepted by a large number of B schools, all right? Some like around 500,000 B schools, more than that, in fact, over 500,000 B schools accept the CMAT scores. But at the end of the session today, we'll also be looking at some of the top B schools which accept the CMAT scores that you should be considering, right, for pursuing your MBA. We'll also be looking at that. CMAT, as I just said, it was conducted today itself, right? So number of test takers are more or less going to be almost on the same line. I have the numbers for the last year test takers, 65,000 approximately. So this year is going to be more or less the same number. So this is your competition, particularly to say this is your competition that you will be vying against, right, fighting against. Now let's talk about when can we expect the results. If you look at the last year trend, so last year, the results were out in roughly 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks time. We expect a similar kind of window this time too. So since the paper was done on 25th Jan, so maybe we can expect our results around Feb 10th to 15th, right? That could be the window when we can expect our results. I said approximately 2 to 3 weeks. Now let's quickly go through the pattern. Were there any changes in the pattern, right? So let me just answer that first. CMAT 2025, there was absolutely no change in the pattern with respect to the previous year's CMAT, previous several years CMAT. Now, one thing very unique about the CMAT test is, which is not there in any other examination, they also test the aptitude of the candidate in the managerial sphere. In the sense, they would be testing the candidate in the form of this section called as innovation and entrepreneurship. So they would be testing the candidates' commerce ability. They would be testing their business acumen little bit, right? Here in the form of MCQs. That section, of course, prevailed, continued this year also. Total number of questions was 100. No change in pattern, as I said, as compared to previous years. Duration was of 3 hours. Now, one good point about the CMAT test, which is not there in several other tests, like for example, CAT, is in CMAT, there is no sectional time limit. So that means if you are really good in a particular section, let's say you're good in LR, you can devote few additional minutes if you want to solve the LR section completely. You can do that, which in other time-based tests, time-limited tests, it's not possible, right? Where the sectional time limit is in place. So there's no sectional time limit this year also. Number of sections is 5, and each section had equal number of questions. So thus each of the 5 sections, which I'll name in a while, had 20 questions each. Now the sections that we are talking about are QT and DI, quantitative techniques and data interpretation. You had LR section, logical reasoning. You had language comprehension, the language section, the VARC section. You had the GK, and lastly you had innovation and entrepreneurship. So these are the 5 sections that you had in the test today. If you look at the marking scheme was for every right, you will get a 4 plus 4, and for every wrong, there was a negative marking. So thus, just like any other examination, here also the word of caution to the students would have been, don't attempt the paper, right, randomly, all right. Try to be sure about your answer before you attempt before you attempt and finally mark the answer, because there's a penalty of 1. Now, by the way, when we say penalty of 1, think of it as penalty of 5. It's not 1 only. I hope you understand the mathematics behind it. So it is a big drag that will be there, all right, drop that will be there in your score, right, on account of one single negative. So let's go through the sections now, one after the other, right. I've also planned to take up few questions for discussion out here, right. And as I said some time back, if there is a specific question that you want me to take up, please do write it in the comments, all right, so that I can look at the comment, I can recall the question and discuss it out here. Right now, I'm present before you the snapshot of the QT and DI section. So overall, there were 20 questions, and this was the breakup. So if you look at it, there were 3 questions from the DI section. The DI was of pretty average difficulty level. It was not at all difficult. It was a very simple DI. It was on pie charts, and the questions were majorly revolving around the percentage change, percentage distribution of students was given. Very simple questions were asked, all right. However, out of the 3 questions, there were 2 which could have been a problem for some of the students, because those 2 questions revolved around finding out fractional value to percentage value, finding out the percentage from the fractional value. If you're not really comfortable with that particular conversion, so those 2 questions could have given you some challenge. Remaining 1 question was a very direct question out here. So out of 3, I would say 1 question was easy and the other 2 were mostly moderate type of questions. But overall doable. DI was pretty doable. Now next we had 2 questions this time from probability. Right? Now one of the questions from probability was pretty easy, pretty direct. The question I'm talking about is this: getting a head on the 5th throw. You're throwing a coin several times. It said the first 4 times there was a tail. What will be the probability that you'll get a head on the 5th throw? It's a very direct question, very simple. No need to solve it at all. This was one easy question that we had from probability. Now there was one more question from probability, which was about 20 girls, probability of having exactly 4 girls between 2 particular girls, A and B. I think this question could have given a little bit of challenge to the students, right? It was not such a direct question. So this was slightly difficult. I put it under the D category out here. So maybe for some of you, it could be M category also. You might say, no, it was not difficult. It was moderate. It's again matter of perception that we have here. I thought this was very easy. This was overall difficult, right? So E to D would be the level of difficulty. So still there was one question that was doable in probability area also. If I talk about ERPV, the next topic, there were 3 questions coming from ERPV and the level of difficulty varied from E to M. Now the 3 questions that we had were, there was a question on the speeds of leopard and tiger, all right, the comparison between speeds of leopard and tiger. There was a question about chocolates distribution. There's a lady who wants to distribute chocolates among 4 kids in a certain ratio. What is the minimum number of chocolates that she should have? Now, these are the kind of questions that you'd have covered in our material already. If you have been practicing our material, our handouts, you would have covered this kind of questions. In fact, I'll just tell you one more point. In fact, the next point only, I'll get there in a while. There was one more question about income values of 4 people. Now, this is one very interesting question. I'll tell you why, if some of you recall. If you try to solve this, it will take you 2 minutes. But on the other hand, since CMAT has options available, if you solve it via options, the same could have been done in 20 to 30 seconds. I don't know how many of you did via options. If you were one of the students who have done it via options, then really good. You were good with the approach selection out there. If you solve it regular way, you will take more time. This was one interesting point. Next, PPL, percentage profit and loss. There were 2 questions coming from this area. The level of difficulty is E to M. Now, there was one question on dishonest trader. Now, this question was directly picked up from our material. Numbers matching too, all right? The numbers as well were matching. So, if you solve the question from our material, there's a very high chance that you would have got this question directly, not even solving it. So, thus I put it under the E category for those questions who have already solved it. Otherwise, it would perhaps be M. The other question was about the consignment which was lost, right? And the seller now has to sell it at a higher price. What is the profit he can expect? It was not so easy. I put it under the M category. So E to M overall was the difficulty. Next, there was one question from the algebra, the basic equations part, right? So just to recall, right, if you can get it, the question was something like this: x square equal to y plus z. Just a minute. Y square equal to z plus x and z square equal to x plus y. And then the question was to find out the value of 1 by x plus 1 plus 1 by y plus 1 plus 1 by z plus 1. So I don't know how you have tried this out, how you have solved it, but I would like to explain the question once. So x square is equal to y plus z was given, y square equal to x z plus x was given, and likewise the third equation was given. And finally, I wanted to arrive at this 1 by x plus 1 plus 1 by y plus 1 plus 1 by z plus 1. I want to find this expression somehow. So the way in which you could have thought about this problem is, let us simply add x on both sides. So the moment I add x on both sides, the benefit is, on left hand side, I have x plus 1 term, the one term that I want here. I want 1 by x plus 1, I find it here. This is equal to x plus y plus z. And hence can I say 1 by x plus 1 will be nothing but x upon x plus y plus z. Similarly proceeding, here can I say 1 by y plus 1 will be equal to y by x plus y plus z. And similarly, here you will get 1 by z plus 1 will be z upon x plus y plus z. So if you follow this, similar process will lead you to this and this. And once you get 1 by x plus 1, 1 by y plus 1 and 1 by z plus 1 value, it's easy to determine the answer. So it was not such a difficult question if you'll ask me. So I put it under M category, right? Not easy, of course, maybe, but M category. Now next, time, speed, distance. We had two questions coming from that area. And the level of difficulty was E to M. Now, easy question was the one which spoke of the time taken during walking to a certain point, time taken for riding to that particular point. There was a question on walking and riding, right? A person takes he says 4 1 by 3 hours, if I'm not wrong, right? 4 1 by 3 hours when he walks to a certain point and returns via riding. If he walks on both sides, he will lose 1 hour. That means he will take 5 1 by 3 hours. What will be the time taken if he rides on both sides? Right? Rides on both sides. So there was a question on this, which was the easy one. And there was one more question. This is the hallmark of this CMAT exam, right? There's one common point about CMAT exam. You get questions involving statements. So there were two statements given about linear race happening, and there was a question asked about the statements as such. So for example, the question was A beats B by 40 meters. I might be wrong with the numbers, I'm just giving you idea. B beats C by 50 meters. A beats C by, say, something like 48 meters or something, some random number I'm taking. This was 20, I believe. And then the question was, the length of the race track was 300 meters. Statement 1, whether true or false. Statement 2, the statement was the ratio of the speeds of the three people was 45 is to 42 is to 30, something like that was there. So there were two statements that we had, and you had to actually check the truthfulness of those statements, whether the statements are correct or not. So these are the kind of questions that you get in CMAT every year, statement based questions. So that was the moderate one. Next, you had one question from simple interest, compound interest, right? There was just one question coming from this area. The question was something on these lines: 1,000 rupees lent at both SI as well as CI. The percentage by which CI is more than SI, right? Not so difficult question, but still not so easy to. It's not that easy to. It will take some time to get to the answer because the options were very close. If you remember, options were 33% was there, 33.33% was also there, 33 was the correct answer. Quadratic equation. So there was one question, and I call it as easy because it was simple. Match the following. There were 4 quadratic equations given on one side, and on the other side of the match the following, you had your roots. It was so easy to match. If you know the sum of the roots, product of the roots formula, it's so easy. No need to solve it. Indices and certs, there were 2 questions, one on indices, one on certs. Both the questions were based on comparisons. So you have to compare 2 indices, for example, 3 to the power 3 to the power 3 to the power 3 was one number, I recall. 3 to the power 333 was another number, I recall. 3 to the power 3 whole power 33, and likewise something else, 333 to the power 3. There were some 4 numbers like this, and you had to compare, write them in descending order. And similarly, you had one question on search 2. AMA, 2 questions again. I would call them as moderate to difficult because there was one question involving two basically solutions, if I'm not wrong, right? Alpha and beta, he called it. And in that, there were NPK percentages given to us. He's mixing these two in a certain ratio. And then the question was to find out in beta, what is the ratio of or percentage of NNP? There was something like this. It's not that easy, not that easy. So this was the difficult one. And there was one more question from the AMA, which was of moderate difficulty level, not so complex question. Geometry, there was just one question, and it was also a 2 statement based question, right? So there was a statement pertaining to medians and sides, relation between median and side, and there was one more regarding some inequality in a triangle. So not so easy, all right? You need to have some basics of geometry for answering that comfortably, and otherwise also, geometry is not an easy topic for many students. Many students are really not into the geometry section, geometry area. So I put it under moderate level. So overall, this was the quant section that you had, right? Quant section that you had. If there's any particular question you want me to take up, please, as I was saying, you can mention it. For now, I'll just move on. Let us take up the other sections also similarly, the snapshot particularly. So if I talk about the logical reasoning section, it was not very challenging. I'll start off by saying this, not very challenging. There were very few questions which were of difficult level or higher moderate M plus difficulty level, right? Very few questions. So this is the basic distribution of questions that you had in the CMAT exam. So for example, there were large number of questions coming from statement based questions. So for example, questions on statement assumptions, assertion reasoning, right? Statement argument type of questions, right? Now, if you had good grip over the critical reasoning aspects, right, language aspects, you could have easily sailed through these 4 questions also without much trouble. However, there were 1 or 2 questions which could have still created some trouble. So thus, I would say overall moderate difficulty. Venn diagrams, there were 3 questions from Venn diagrams. It's a pretty large number, 3. And all the questions were easy. The point to be noted is it's easy. Just to help you recall, there was one question involving 3-set Venn diagram. Some of you may argue it was not easy, maybe moderate. I would also maybe agree to that. But I felt it was easy because information was directly given to you. You had nothing to solve there. Region identification, there was a question on triangles represents MBA, circle represents women, square represents managers, etc. There was one question on that, very easy to identify. And there was one on match the following. One Venn diagram question on match the following as well. Moving on, next if you go to cubes, there were 2 questions. Right? Now both the questions I would say were not easy, both of them. There was one question which was based on pure observation, wherein the cube's placement was given in different orientations. For example, something like this, numbers may vary. And likewise, there were 2 more positions that were given for cube. And the question was, which of the following number faces will be opposite face number 4? So it was not so direct, right? And if you try to work your way around by taking the positions of the cube, it would have become very complicated. Rather, had you started off by assuming, okay, let's assume 4 is opposite 1, then it would have been a little bit easier. But I'm not sure how many of you were able to pick that up. So I'm assuming that most of you went by rotation, turning of these pieces, which would have made the job little bit difficult, not easy. So I said this was also moderate level. The other one that we had in cubes, the other question, that was also a question on cubes dealing with cuts and pieces, and it was colored cubes question, right? Question on colored cubes. Not so easy again, right? Not so easy. But if you have attended the basics classes, if you have solved such questions in the past, then maybe you can call this as easy. Maybe you can call this as easy, but otherwise, overall, I'll say moderate. There was one question, miscellaneous type, which involved counting of squares. There was a random figure which was given. Again, I might be wrong with the figure, but I'm just trying to give you an idea, overall idea. The figure was something like this. And then the question was count the number of squares here, right? Count the number of squares here. So there were 4 different options, 23, 24, 27 was also there, and I believe 27 was the answer there, right? But again, 27 was the highest number also there. There's one more way to know that you have not got the wrong answer, because if you could count it till 27 and 27 is the largest option, that is definitely the correct answer. Counting of squares, one question was there, I would call it as moderate, because not many people would be able to count it in an organized, structured manner. Sequence of events, this was one of the easiest question, and just to help you recall, this was the question. There were some 5 words which were given: police, crime, court, judgment, punishment, and then it was asked what should be the correct sequence. So crime should happen, then police will come, then police will take to the court, then judgment will be passed, punishment will be meted out to that particular. Very easy question. So very, very direct, very easy question. So I hope you have not missed out on such questions. Number series and number identifier. So there was a question on number series, not so difficult, and number identifier, which was also not so difficult. But looking at that grid, that square-like figure, it was something like this. Not even square. If you can recall, it was something like this. There was a hexagon with protruding sides, and there were numbers given here. One of the numbers was missing. The property was pretty simple here. So some of the numbers on the opposite sides were equal. That was the property. Very, very direct if you can identify. If you can't identify, you will keep struggling with the question. So this was number series and number identifier. Then you had one question from clocks, not so easy, not it. So it was about defective clocks. There was one question on blood relation, very direct. A simple sentence was given, statement was given, and you had to identify the relation of the speaker to that person in that question. Very, very direct question. Direction sense, probably one of the easiest again. So just by looking at direction sense question, some of you might have felt overwhelmed by, okay, maybe Pythagoras theorem will be used or something else will be used. Nothing of that sort was there. The question was simply this: a person starts at point, he goes north 40 meters, he turns left 20 meters, he again turns left, he's coming down 40 meters. Now you were supposed to answer what is his final position with respect to initial position. So no Pythagoras theorem, nothing, no addition, no subtractions to be done. Simple question, very, very easy question. There was a question on linear arrangement, not difficult, right? But since there was some piece, some like 4 or 5 points of information, I put it under moderate level difficulty. Not difficult, but easy to manage. Easily one could have solved it. Not very complicated. There was one question on symbols, all right? So there was this number, if I'm not wrong, given 95137248. The question was arrange these numbers in ascending order. So you'll do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is there, 6 is missing, 7, 8, 9. And then the question was how many pairs of digits are there in the original number which have equal number of digits between them in the given number also and this obtained number also. So how many pairs of digits are there which will have equal number of digits in between? Not so difficult, but again not so easy because you had to carry out this operation, observe it a little, right? So I would put it under moderate because it's not very direct, right? Pretty doable. See what all, wherever I'm putting M, I don't mean to say they are M to D, they are E to M types, right? Easy to moderate types. Odd man out, pretty easy. There was this question about hurricane, earthquake, right? There was a bomb blast also given. So bomb blast, of course, would be the odd man out. There was a question on analogy, very easy question. So overall, if you'll see the reasoning section too, it was on the easier side, fairly on the easier side. So this would be the snapshot of the reasoning section. Easy to moderate difficulty level, because as I said, a question that I'm calling it as M might be easy for some of you. A question I'm calling as E might be M for some of you. Similarly, snapshot of the language comprehension, the language English section, VA and RC. So the breakup, I have done it like this. There were 3 groups that I've created. So one group of questions had questions on reading comprehension section. All right. See, the RC in CMAT was very direct. There were just 5 questions, and all these 5 questions were of easy difficulty level. Right? They were not very complicated. Right? They were not very complicated. They were easy to moderate, I say, because sometimes there could be some amount of confusion that might prevail when you're reading a question or reading a set of options, right? So thus maybe M. There were two passages, very short ones. So one of the passage was about Mughals, all right? So Mughals, how they are planning to shift their capital, how they have shifted the capitals, what could be the reasons behind that, all right, etc. The passage was just 80 words. So 80 words, reading it would not even take like 2 minutes. It would be done in a minute. You would be done with reading the passage in a minute. And the questions following that were fill in the blanks. In that particular passage, it was fill in the blanks. The other passage was about Shivaji, right? Shivaji. And this was also a very short passage. And there were just two questions in this. The two questions were about the narrative type, right? What type of narrative is being used there? The first person narrative, second person, third person narrative. And the other question that was there was about the background of that particular context, the text which was given. So again, overall, the reading comprehension section was not really a big challenge, so to say, right? It was easy to manage type of section. Now next, it was VA grammar, verbal ability, the grammar part. So there were large number of questions coming from this area. There were 12, and the level of difficulty I put it at E to M. There were different types of questions that you had under this. I have just mentioned it here, right? The question types were there were questions on active passive conversion, right? Active voice to passive voice conversion. There were quite a lot of questions which were on identifying the grammatically correct, incorrect questions, statements. The grammatically correct sentences, grammatically incorrect sentences. There was a question on odd one out, right? There was a question about preposition, right? Usage of preposition. There were questions on critical reasoning, all right? On compound sentence identifier, which of the following is a compound sentence, all right? Para formations, but not so difficult. Para formations and all were very direct, not so challenging. Just by reading it, you would understand the paragraph should begin with this particular option choice only. There were such cases also. Para formation, sentence reordering, and noun types. Questions were on noun types. So overall, if you'll ask me, the level of difficulty was majorly easy, sometimes moderate. Right? And finally, there were few questions from vocab based verbal ability also, VA based on vocab. There were just 3 questions from this area. Level of difficulty, I would place it at E to M. The questions revolved around, there were questions on one word substitution. All right, about some context in sports was given, all right, some other context was given, one word substitution. One match, the following question was there, which involved with synonyms, right? The question was on synonyms, not so difficult to identify. See, generally, the tendency with match the following questions is, if you get 1 or 2 pairs right, generally you get the answer also right? So that kind of trick works in match the following questions. It was there in your VA section, VARC section also, language comprehension section also. Moving on, overall, we would place it at moderate difficulty level. Next, the GK section, I won't call it as easy, difficult or whatever, right? I'll just give you a breakup, right? Because GK is an area which is easy if you know it, hard if you don't know it, simple, right? GK, you cannot have question which is very difficult or very easy. If you know it, it's easy, otherwise it's not. It's as simple as that, right? So the breakup of the questions was, there were a couple of questions from constitution politics, right? There were a couple of questions from current affairs, right? There were few questions from science and tech. For example, just to name a few questions, there was a question about who is, recently there was one of the army personnel, right, who died in helicopter crash, right? So the question was about what was his name, right? So that was a current affairs question. There was a question about which of the following, there were 4 names given, which of the following have ever been the vice president of India in the history of India, which of the following had ever been vice president of India? It was so easy to answer because there was one option which had Venkaiah Naidu in it, and there was only one option including that. So if you could follow that Venkaiah Naidu was the VP, vice president, you could answer that question also. Science and tech, there were quite a few questions, right? 6 questions coming from science and tech. Geography and locations, places, there were also good number of questions. 4. Sports, there were 3 questions, out of which 2 were on cricket. One was about the Wankhede Stadium, where is it located? And the other one was cricket is the national game for which country, right? India, Australia, Russia, China, these are the options. So easy to identify, right? And there was one question on Olympics 2028. History, there were 2 questions. There was one question about Khilji. There were some 5-6 statements, not so easy, but let me tell you, not so easy, because in that the depth of the question was just there, right? The depth was really there, right? Because someone will have to be really well read so as to answer those questions, right? Because the question was talking about what kind of arrangement has he made for the horses, right? Because someone who has read about his life history would be able to answer that, not someone who has watched a movie or an article about Khilji, right? There was one more question about Akbar, right? Akbar Nama and all. There was one question from arts, which was about a dance form, right? Dance form. So this was the breakup of the GK section. So in this, I believe anywhere from 10 to 11 questions could have been attempted, right? Because either you read newspapers or you have some basic knowledge, right? For example, as I was talking about VP, vice president, it could have been answered, right? So likewise, there were quite a few questions. Just I'm going back a little bit. Similarly, in language comprehension, right, a decent attempt, right, what could be the number of attempts that we could have here easily is an average candidate, right, with average intelligence would be able to solve around 12 to 14 questions correctly here. If I talk about LR, I would put the same number, around 15 questions easily in LR also, because you had quite a lot of time, 3 hours of time. Quant, again, the number that I would put for this would be around 12 to 14 again, right? This would be the good numbers, right? Anything more than that is, of course, good, better. Now, the last section that we had was innovation and entrepreneurship. So this is the unique section that CMAT only has, right, in all the tests that happen during the season, right? Now, in this section, there were 20 questions overall, right? So I'm not giving you the breakup because there's no heading as such that I can associate the questions with. Overall, the heading I'm giving is IND, innovation and entrepreneurship. 20 questions, level of difficulty was E to M or E to D, we may say, because the questions were sometimes really, really vague for an average reader, right? Average test taker. So questions were based on, there were different areas that you were tested on. For example, feasibility analysis was there, cost benefit analysis was there, SWOT analysis questions were there, entrepreneur based questions were there, types of entrepreneur. There was one term which was used, I think I've added, Fabian entrepreneurs. What do you mean by Fabian entrepreneur? There was one more, there was bootstrapped entrepreneurs. So there are different terms that you need to know so as to answer the questions correctly. Because if you do not understand these terms, there is no way, without guessing, of course, you'll get to the right answer. There were match the following questions also, and those were based on the definitions and functions. For example, in the match the following questions, you had the cost benefit analysis, SWOT analysis, right? SWOT analysis used for what? What is its functionality, right? There was about revenue models, questions about revenue models. What is the impact of that? What is the utility of that? There were questions about intrapreneurs, right? What do you mean by intrapreneur? In fact, there were 2 questions about intrapreneurs. So in order to do well in this section, people who had worked hard on the business front, right, on the commerce front, would have managed somehow some of the questions here. Now, this would also be kind of heads up for people who are going to take CMAT the coming year. You need to prepare. If you want to score high, you need to prepare well in this section also, because this also carry equal weightage like Quant or LR or any other section. So this was about the innovation and entrepreneurship, the last section. Just a minute. Just give me a minute, please. I'll just show it to you properly so that you can read it. So font size, please excuse that, right? So there is some error, some problem that has come in here. The font size has changed. So there's a large number of colleges, right? As I was saying at the start of the session, some 500,000 colleges that accept CMAT scores. But again, not all of them are good. So what are the top B schools that you should be considering, and what are their tentative cutoffs? Because see, these are the numbers for last year. This year it might change. It might change drastically also, but I can just give you some kind of hint to whether you are on the right track or not. So there is one good B school that you have, which is Somaiya, KG Somaiya, based in Mumbai. So the expected cutoff that we think it would have is 95 percentile as far as your CMAT is concerned. NIBM Pune, it's based in Pune, of course. It would be having 98 percentile. and IFMR and Wellinger, right, Wellinger based in Mumbai, would be 90 percentile. All right. So these are the 3-4 colleges that I could state, all right, out of the 500,000 number, right. That means the remaining colleges are not that great. So if you're planning to go for CMAT colleges, these should be on your list. So with that, we have come to the end of the session today. Thank you and all the very best.